Today in our studio we have Greg Simmons, an associate professor based at the Institute for Russian Studies, Uppsala University. Good afternoon, Mr. Simmons.
Good afternoon.
So the first question, in your opinion, which candidate is more likely to win, in which states and among which voters?
Well, I mean, at this stage, it seems that Trump is increasingly likely to win the election, even though you have Biden at the moment, who is being supported by the liberal mainstream media, by politics, mainstream politics, and things like this. They're making basically the same fundamental errors that were made 4 years ago with Hillary Clinton. That is, they are ignoring a big segment of voters and concentrating on those voters which are restricted to these large liberal havens on the strips of either coast, these big urban areas. They're leaving out the voters in the middle again, the so-called, what the Americans refer to as the flyover zone, those states which are not so liberally inclined and a little bit left behind by the forces of globalization. So, I mean, you have the same facade. I mean, you have the polls saying one thing. I mean, Michael Moore, who is a critic of Trump and politics, American politics in general, he's very liberal, but 2016, he said Trump would win, which was against what was the mainstream consensus at the time. And he's saying Trump is likely to win again. So, I mean, and this is coming down to the same points which I just mentioned now.
Okay, I got that. Thank you. So next one is, whose political strategies will be more effective for the recovery and further development of the U.S. economy?
Okay, so I mean, if we look at it, the American economy is in problems because otherwise, why would you have this on again, off again trade war with China? So, I mean, this is a significant demonstration that everything is not rosy with the American economy. And part of the reason why it is at this stage is because of liberal government policies, which under globalization exported US production abroad in order to make greater profit. So now, I mean, these policies are coming back with the consequences of doing that. I mean, Trump is talking about trying to take back the US economy, but I mean, increasingly, I mean, it's too little too late. I mean, there are even people who support the system that say it cannot be recovered. I mean, the damage is done, and it was done before Trump. Trump is accelerating the damage. So it's not a very rosy prospect for the US economy. So, I mean, you have sometimes it goes up a little, sometimes it goes down a little, but relatively speaking, I mean, the economy is in decline.
Okay, thank you. In your opinion, what can be expected for Russia when each candidate comes to power?
Okay. Interestingly, I was asked a similar question way back in 2008 by a Russian media outlet. What are Russia's prospects when we get a Democratic president rather than a Republican president? And my answer at that stage was that, okay, you have Obama coming to power, but this is not the main issue. The main issue is that there are certain relationships and certain policies that cut across all party lines. So you have Iran, you have Cuba, and you have Russia. So in this case, that not much will change. It can get a little worse, it can get a little better, but no great fundamental change. one can say, okay, under Biden, I don't think it would improve because, I mean, he's part of the clique from where Hillary Clinton comes from, and she's not particularly renowned for being so Russia friendly. But then Trump himself, I mean, he might be more pragmatic than ideological, but then he is constrained by the politics of his country. So, and he's also into this extracting the best deal for the United States at the cost of whoever he is negotiating a deal with. It doesn't matter if it's China, Iran, the European Union, or Russia. So, I mean, in this regard, I mean, I'm not a very good bearer of good or positive news, but I mean, I think this is the basic outlook for this particular question.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the last question, whether greater interference in the internal affairs of other countries is possible when a democratic party comes to power?
I would say probably, but then this may not be the case because of internal reasons. And I think one of the biggest constraints on the United States interference with the internal affairs of other countries now is that its own internal affairs are so messed up, and I mean, more and more people are saying it's increasingly at the point where it's possibly going to be another civil war, and quite a messy one. And I think one of the things which contributes to this is that what the Democrats and liberals in general have been doing in order to advance short-term political gains, that is to regain their hegemony and political power, they've been destroying the fundamental myths that hold the United States together, because it's a very diverse country with different peoples and so forth. When you take away those myths, there's not much for them to keep together. I mean, one can also look at that. I mean, Russia learnt from this issue under Gorbachev. When you start destroying the fundamental myths of a very diverse country, it doesn't take much for it to fall apart. And I mean, when speaking to people in the past, I mean, it kind of confirms it. I mean, just one occasion, speaking with a US veteran, and I mean, his comments, and this, bear in mind, this was 8 years ago. He said that among the biggest recruits in the United States Army at that stage were people from what they called militias, and these different radical and far-right groups, because what they believed is that the US, even at that stage, was heading for a new civil war. And their logic was that they needed as many combat-trained people as possible before this war starts. Now, come forward to 2020, if you look at the videos of some of these people guarding different objects, these people are quite often wearing ex-military kit with the tags torn off it and very heavily armed. So, I mean, the will might be there to interfere in other people's internal affairs, but I suspect the opportunity will not, because they're already having to deal with a lot, and it's not going to decrease their deteriorating internal situation for the United States.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you, Mr. Simmons. Goodbye.